William drops a bombshell over Camilla's financial scandal violation, marking his daring move. In the turbulent history of the British monarchy, few moments have shaken the institution as powerfully as the one that has just unfolded. Prince William, heir to the throne and long regarded by the public as a symbol of stability and trust, has publicly accused Queen Camilla of being involved in a serious financial scandal. According to William, Camilla misused royal funds for personal purposes, diverting resources meant to preserve public duties and national heritage into tools for her own gain. This was not merely a personal allegation. It was a direct blow to the honor of the House of Windsor, threatening to destabilize a foundation already fragile at a time when society demands transparency and integrity more than ever. The revelation sparked an immediate firestorm. Public opinion, already divided over Camilla's place within King Charles III's reign, erupted in anger at the possibility of misconduct at the highest levels. The media swiftly dubbed it the Buckingham earthquake, not only tarnishing Camilla's individual reputation, but also placing the stability of the monarchy itself in question. Lawmakers and constitutional experts were quick to weigh in, raising the uncomfortable question: if these allegations prove true, could the monarchy still command the unconditional trust of the British people? Inside the palace, the fallout was even more dramatic. William, who for years had kept his distance from internal battles, chose this moment to break the silence and confront Camilla openly. His decision begged a larger question. What drove William to publicly challenge the woman Charles had defended at all costs? Was this simply an effort to salvage the monarchy's reputation, or was it fueled by years of buried resentment and grief? And more importantly, could the House of Windsor withstand this storm, or would it collapse under the very secrets it had worked so hard to conceal? If you are drawn to the mysteries behind the monarchy's glittering facade, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. This is only the beginning of a story that could permanently reshape the image of Britain's most powerful family. Long before this financial scandal threatened to shake the throne, the relationship between Prince William and Queen Consort Camilla had already been fraught with tension. On the surface, they appeared together in photographs, exchanged polite smiles, and stood side by side on the palace balcony or at charity events. To the public, it looked as if the royal family had managed to heal after the tragedy of Diana. But those who knew the truth understood that beneath the civility lay a cold distance that could never be bridged. From the moment Camilla officially became Charles's wife, William had been forced to adapt. He knew her presence was not simply that of a stepmother, but the embodiment of the greatest wound his mother had ever endured. Camilla tried to build bridges, using kindness and tact to soften William's distrust. There were private dinners, warm words spoken in public, even joint efforts on charitable causes close to his heart. Yet in William's eyes, these gestures always carried the weight of calculation, a mask that could never truly hide the bitter history between them. William, deeply rooted in tradition and fiercely protective of Diana's legacy, never openly attacked Camilla, but his distance was plain for all to see. Observers noticed he often chose to sit far from her at official events or avoided moments of warmth that the media could seize upon. Instead, he poured his focus into Catherine and their children, making it clear where the heart and future of the monarchy truly lay. For Camilla, the reality was stark. William was the greatest obstacle to her legitimacy. Winning his support could have softened her image before the public. But without it, the frost between them remained an ever-present fracture, waiting to split wide open. Their relationship was less a bond than an uneasy truce, a fragile pact built on necessity rather than trust. For the financial evidence was laid bare. The cracks had always been there, only no one dared to speak of them. Both William and Camilla chose to preserve the veneer, knowing full well the monarchy could not withstand another public blow. But fate has a cruel way of unraveling secrets. Tensions that had long been suppressed eventually erupted, and when the financial scandal broke, every hidden distance between William and Camilla suddenly solidified into an unbridgeable wall. The strain in their relationship, once simmering quietly, exploded into a full-scale earthquake when the prince decided to go further than he ever had before. In the past, William had merely kept his distance, carefully limiting Camilla's presence in shared engagements. This time, he struck directly, unveiling truths that left the entire royal household reeling. At an emergency meeting convened within the palace walls, William arrived carrying a thick file of documents, papers he declared were irrefutable proof of Camilla's abuse of royal funds. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. Familiar faces of the monarchy, from senior advisors to core members of the family, turned toward William in disbelief. Never had the usually composed prince revealed such steely resolve. His voice cut through the silence, measured, steady, yet chillingly cold, as he recited figures, unexplained expenses, and a trail of dubious transactions. The documents, according to William, exposed a network of secret overseas accounts, channeling money into funds deliberately hidden from official royal records. More alarmingly, they detailed massive real estate dealings, shielded by shell companies to obscure ownership. At last, the whispers of extravagant spending and unexplained power surrounding Camilla seemed to take shape. Her lavish lifestyle and growing influence, William suggested, were not merely the privileges of a queen consort but the fruits of a shadowy financial web. Shock rippled through the room. Some members quietly shook their heads in disbelief, unwilling to accept what they were hearing. Others exchanged troubled glances, silently wondering whether the monarchy could ever salvage its honor after such a blow. For years, rumors of questionable finances had lingered at the edges of public discourse, but no one expected William himself to be the one to rip away the veil. His action was more than an accusation against Camilla. It was a warning: if the monarchy continued to ignore such misconduct, the collapse of public trust would be inevitable. At a time when the royal family was struggling to rebuild its image after repeated scandals, this revelation was nothing less than a raging fire set ablaze within the walls of an ancient institution. What unsettled those present even more than the revelations themselves was the pressing question of how William had uncovered such damning evidence. Did he receive help from loyal financial advisors within the palace, or had covert informants with long-standing oversight of royal funds tipped him off? Some even speculated that William had enlisted independent watchdog organizations to compile an airtight dossier, ensuring that once exposed, Camilla would have no path of escape. Page after page, figure after figure. William's presentation was not merely evidence but a declaration of war. This was no longer a personal rift between a prince and his stepmother. It had become a battle for transparency and the very credibility of the monarchy. And with that, a haunting question began to echo in every mind present. Had William stumbled upon a financial conspiracy far larger than even he imagined? And if so, did he possess the strength to take on Camilla and the forces behind her? If the emergency meeting tore apart the financial veil surrounding Camilla, it also pulled into the light, darker stories of her grip on palace life. The staggering sums revealed by William were only one side of the story. Behind the polished image of a smiling queen consort, Camilla had long unsettled those who worried under her, ruling her staff with a severity that bordered on ruthless. For years, whispers circulated that Camilla was far from the genial figure she projected in public. Once she ascended to the role of queen consort, she enforced a litany of strict rules, where even the smallest misstep could result in punishment. One staff member recalled being docked pay simply for placing a glass in the wrong spot at a banquet. Another reportedly faced harsh penalties after spilling a few drops of sauce while serving. What should have been forgivable human mistakes became excuses for Camilla to exert her dominance, turning palace life for employees into an existence riddled with fear and unease. The story of Marian and Oliver stands as the clearest example. Marian, a woman who had devoted nearly 2 decades of her life to the palace, was once respected by her colleagues for her dedication and discipline. Yet one single mistake, when a tablecloth was folded a few centimeters off, cost her a fine so severe that it wiped out almost an entire month's wages. Oliver, a young and eager newcomer, became another victim when he accidentally let a single drop of wine fall to the floor. That tiny mishap saddled him with a fine so steep he could no longer afford his rent, forcing him to borrow from friends just to survive. These seemingly small incidents revealed the sheer injustice and crushing pressure that Camilla imposed on people who only wished to fulfill their duties. The atmosphere inside the palace grew more suffocating than ever. Staff arrived each day with heavy hearts, terrified that every gesture, every step, could be twisted into an excuse for punishment. Instead of a workplace tied to pride and loyalty, the palace was transformed into a place haunted by fear. Forced smiles, wary glances, and whispered conversations behind closed doors became the new normal. As William pushed forward in exposing financial secrets, the accusations that Camilla had abused her own staff cut even deeper into her already shaky image. The public now questioned not only the money but the moral integrity of a woman who bears the title of queen. And in this tense climate, one painful truth began to emerge. Was Camilla turning herself into a symbol of fear rather than a figure of respect? The stories of unfair fines endured by Marion, Oliver, and many others seemed, at first, to remain private frustrations within the palace walls. But when William began digging deeper, he stumbled upon something far more explosive. The fines never disappeared into the palace's financial system as they should have. Instead, the money was funneled into a shadowy fund worth £48,000, which was then quietly transferred into an account under Camilla's control. What shocked everyone most was how cleverly this money trail was hidden. It wasn't just petty sums buried in the books. It was an organized scheme, executed with sophisticated layers of intermediaries. William traced the funds and discovered that the money from palace staff fines was being laundered through a shell company based in Thailand. On paper, this company appeared to be an importer of handmade crafts, but in reality, it had no genuine commercial activity. Its sole purpose was to receive and move money overseas, evading the scrutiny of British financial regulators. From Thailand, the funds were rerouted to Cornwall, where they resurfaced as a mysterious investment in a luxurious coastal mansion. This property wasn't registered directly under Camilla's name, but instead through a trust managed by one of her close associates. Yet, cross-checking records revealed a striking overlap between the timing of money transfers and payments made for renovations to the mansion. What made the case undeniable was a series of leaked emails from Camilla's own office. In them were explicit instructions demanding that all collections from the fine fund be transferred into the shell company's account, with an emphasis that this must remain strictly confidential. One email even bore the digital signature of a senior aide, confirming that the transfer had been completed according to Her Majesty's directions. For William, this evidence was a razor-sharp blade, proof that the hard-earned money of palace staff had been twisted into a private cash machine. This revelation sent shockwaves not only through William, but through all those who had once respected Camilla. It transformed the fines from petty cruelty into a calculated scheme of personal enrichment. Instead of being a royal figurehead, Camilla now appeared as a woman exploiting her power, turning fear into profit. Royal experts commented that William's discovery was the missing piece of the scandal. Had it only been staff complaints, the matter might have been dismissed as exaggeration or internal friction. But with financial records, assets, and incriminating emails, every avenue of denial was blocked. The real question was no longer whether Camilla had done this, but for how long, and what other hidden assets were yet to be uncovered. At this moment, the monarchy faced a fresh crisis of credibility. Where once public opinion had been divided on Camilla's abuse of power, William's ironclad evidence shifted the balance entirely. And as the truth of the secret Cornwall mansion came to light, the public began to wonder, was this merely the tip of the iceberg in Camilla's insatiable ambition? When the financial evidence became undeniable, William knew he could not keep it to himself any longer. After countless sleepless nights, he resolved to confront Camilla directly. The atmosphere inside the private meeting room at Buckingham Palace was suffocating, as if even the walls were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. On the long wooden table, William placed a thick stack of documents, then suddenly slammed them down in front of Camilla, sending pages scattering across the surface. His voice cut through the tense air, cold but burning with pent-up fury. "This is irrefutable proof. You exploited the staff, turned their fear into money, and used it to enrich yourself." For a split second, Camilla froze, her eyes flashing with surprise, before her familiar arrogance quickly returned. She tilted her head, curling her lips into a mocking smirk. "You truly are Diana's son," she sneered, each word like the stab of a blade. "Always dramatic, always trying to stage some grand tragedy to paint yourself as the hero. Do you think you're nobler than the rest, or are you just desperate to carry on the emotional spectacle your mother once put on for the public?" The room fell silent at her cruel remark. But if Camilla hoped invoking Diana's name would weaken William, she was mistaken. Instead, his eyes blazed hotter. He stepped closer, his voice dropping low yet firm, each word etched into the air. "Yes, I am Diana's son, and because of that, I will never stand by while others are exploited and humiliated. My mother endured betrayal in the suffocating silence of this palace. I will not let history repeat itself." Camilla said nothing, her hand trembling slightly though she tried to maintain her air of defiance. But the pile of documents in front of her spoke louder than any words. Inside were everything: bank statements, directive emails, even contracts tied to the secret Cornwall estate. Each page was a blade slicing through her reputation, leaving every excuse in tatters. What made the moment even more dramatic was the stark contrast between the two figures in the room. On one side stood Camilla, once the master of manipulating public opinion to secure her place beside Charles, now cornered like a defendant. On the other was William, who had never sought direct confrontation, yet now stood tall with unshakable conviction, strengthened by the memory of his mother. In that instant, he was not only a prince or a son, but a symbol of justice, a reminder that the monarchy must be anchored in transparency and integrity. Later, many royal commentators would call this confrontation a turning point. For years, Camilla had remained untouchable, shielded by Charles's power and carefully maintained silence. But when William hurled those documents onto the table, that silence shattered. There was no room left for denial, no curtain left to hide behind. In the eyes of the public, William's stance evoked Diana not in tragedy, but in courage, the courage to voice truths others wanted buried. He wasn't fighting merely for his own honor, but for the staff who had been abused, for the moral legacy his mother had left behind. That was why, when Camilla mocked that he was Diana's son, William transformed her taunt into a vow of honor. And in the aftermath of that clash, one question grew louder in the minds of many. Could Charles continue shielding Camilla when the truth now lay bare? And when William had publicly taken his stand for justice? After witnessing the fiery confrontation between William and Camilla, Charles had no choice but to speak. His face bore exhaustion, his eyes etched with the deep lines of a man torn between king, husband, and father. Raising his hand to urge William to sit, he spoke slowly, his voice hoarse and unsteady. "William, this cannot get out. It will destroy the monarchy, plunge us into a crisis we may never recover from. Let me handle it internally. I promise I will act, but you must stay silent." The room sank into silence, broken only by the ticking of a clock. William held his father's gaze, unwavering. He drew a deep breath, then replied, each word slicing through the air. "No, y'all. Father, justice cannot be bargained away. Mother was betrayed by the silence of this palace, and if I stay silent now, her sacrifice becomes meaningless. I will not repeat that mistake." Charles closed his eyes, bitterness flickering across his face. He knew William was right, yet his heart felt torn in two. On one side was the wife he had fought for years to legitimize. On the other was his son, carrying the trust and admiration of the public. To protect Camilla meant losing William and the nation. To stand with William meant casting his marriage into ruin. After a heavy pause, Charles opened his eyes and looked straight at his son. His voice dropped, weighted like stone. You want justice, then justice it will be. I will not shield her any longer. But remember, this decision will change everything. Then, yet, in a moment no one in the room would ever forget, Charles picked up the file and placed it in front of his son. His words rang out clear, each syllable carrying the weight of a solemn pledge. From this moment on, all financial oversight of the royal household will be entrusted to you. I believe you will guard this family's honor better than anyone else. In that instant, the balance of power within the monarchy shifted. William was no longer just the heir apparent. He had become the man holding real authority in his hands. And Charles, by acknowledging the truth and relinquishing control, accepted that to save the crown, he would have to sacrifice peace in his private life. At the Grand Hall of St. James Palace, the atmosphere turned heavy as Prince William appeared before hundreds of international journalists. In his hands was a thick dossier, its tightly bound pages seeming to hold secrets powerful enough to shake the monarchy to its core. William spoke without flourish, without evasion. He declared openly that there was irrefutable evidence of fines and treasury funds being misappropriated. Before the cameras, he held up bank statements, pointing to exact transactions. £48,000 funneled through a shell company in Thailand, then redirected into an anonymous fund to purchase a secret estate in Cornwall. The room erupted, the rapid fire of camera shutters, the buzz of urgent whispers spreading like wildfire. But William pressed on. He pulled up a digital file on the large screen behind him. A series of authenticated emails appeared, each traced back to the office of Queen Camilla. One message in particular froze the hall into stunned silence. It bore Camilla's own electronic signature, instructing intermediaries on how to process the transfers. In that moment, the veil was torn away. These were no longer rumors, no longer speculation. This was truth, raw and undeniable, displayed for the world to see. Camilla, seated in the front row, paled. Rising to her feet, she tried to counter, insisting the emails had been doctored, that her directives were merely administrative and unrelated to personal finance. But her words fell flat under the piercing gaze of hundreds of journalists. The digital signature was damning. Every attempt at denial dissolved against the weight of the evidence. Shouts rang out, questions hurled, and the queen consort found herself cornered with no escape. What shocked the world even more was Charles's silence. The king sat rigid, his face tense, his eyes distant. Not once did he rise to defend his wife. That silence in that room spoke louder than 1,000 words. It was an unspoken admission that William's revelations could not be denied. The press erupted, the story hurtling instantly to the center of global headlines. Outlets from the Times to the Guardian to the New York Times pushed breaking alerts with explosive headlines about the monarchy in crisis. The impact of that press conference rippled far beyond palace walls. Social media exploded, thousands of posts of shock, outrage, and demands for sweeping reform to the monarchy itself. Crowds gathered outside, expecting a routine royal appearance, but instead became witnesses to a political and family earthquake. William, with unflinching resolve in the steel of his mother's legacy, had done what no one imagined possible. He exposed the truth from within the palace itself. And in that moment, Camilla cornered, Charles silent, the world watching, the monarchy's darkest chapter opened before the public eye, one whose aftershocks would reverberate for years. Within hours, video clips of William raising the bank records, the emails, the Cornwall estate details went viral. On YouTube and across every platform, the phrase "the corrupt crown" spread like wildfire. racking up more than 20 million views in just 24 hours. It was no longer mere reporting. It had become a symbol of generational defiance. A son of Diana openly challenging the entrenched powers that had long overshadowed his family. The phrase "the corrupt crown" cut like a blade through the carefully curated image of royal virtue. Public reaction was immediate and fierce. Thousands hailed William as the rightful heir to the throne, a man brave enough to stand against injustice, even if it meant confronting his own father. Newspapers drew direct parallels to Princess Diana, dubbing him the true heir to Diana's spirit, celebrating his courage, integrity, and his connection to ordinary people. Images of William side by side with Diana spread like wildfire, casting him as the continuation of her unfinished fight against the forces that had once crushed her. Camilla, meanwhile, became the lightning rod of global criticism. The press painted her as a manipulator, a woman who had exploited her position for greed and secrecy. Opinion columns described her as cold, calculating, utterly unlike the royal consort the public had once hoped for. On social media, ridicule poured down in torrents, mocking nicknames, venomous memes, branding her as the woman who had brought the monarchy to the brink. The image of the monarchy, once seen as untouchable, now lies shattered in the eyes of the public. Trust has been shaken to its core, as long-standing symbols of tradition are exposed in a mire of corruption and intrigue. The media replayed endlessly the image of William holding aloft the file, his face resolute, yet his eyes filled with pain, as if to remind the world that this was not merely a financial scandal, but a battle for honor and justice. The force of modern media turned that press conference into a global earthquake. And in the middle of the storm, the public began to ask, could this be the beginning of an irreversible change for the British monarchy, where an old chapter collapses to make way for a new era of transparency and connection? As the shockwaves from the financial scandal and the explosive press conference spread, the monarchy was forced to make an unprecedented decision in modern history. Camilla was expelled from the center of power, ordered to leave the palace and retreat to a remote country home. The titles once bestowed upon her were quietly but firmly stripped away. Her role in official engagements came to an end, marking a final line under a period of controversy and division. For many, this was delayed justice for Diana, a cleansing act to restore some measure of dignity to the crown. But for Camilla, it was nothing less than total collapse, a fall from the heights of power that left no path to redemption. Alongside Camilla's removal, William set in motion a process of restoring order within the palace. One of his first and most symbolic steps was to abolish the harsh regulations Camilla had once imposed on palace staff. Unfair fines for trivial mistakes, such as spilling sauce or misplacing a glass, were repaid in full. Beyond that, William authorized wage increases, improved working conditions, and reinstated the respect and dignity that palace staff had always deserved. The story of Marion and Oliver, once victims of those absurd penalties, resurfaced as living proof of real change. They were not only compensated, but felt recognition and humanity from the man destined to be king. This shift restored morale within the household and sparked a new atmosphere across the palace. Hallways once steeped in fear now echoed with laughter, renewed energy, and a sense that justice could prevail even in the seat of supreme power. The media relentlessly cast William as the embodiment of royal justice, a man unafraid to confront the shadows in order to defend transparency and honor. Comparisons with his mother, Princess Diana, grew ever sharper. Like her, William chose to stand with the vulnerable, willing to bear immense pressure to uphold what is right. Yet unlike Diana, William now holds the authority to reshape the system from within. Through these actions, the palace regained a measure of vitality, along with the hope of a new era for the monarchy. But the question lingers, will William's bold moves be enough to redefine the future of a monarchy facing immense trials? Will the transparency and justice he represents form the foundation of a lasting reign, or prove to be only a fleeting light in the storm of public scrutiny? And now, We turn to you, our viewers who have followed this extraordinary sagas. Do you believe William can lead the monarchy into a new chapter? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more untold stories where royal secrets and truths await. Because sometimes the justice we long for rests in the hands of those brave enough to challenge the throne itself.